This is part 2 of the lesson series on modulation. In this video, I'll describe 5 more modulations to close keys, but this time starting from a minor key. We'll set up modulations from A minor to C major, G major, E minor, F major, and D minor. Once again, I'm going to use the modulation technique that uses a common chord to both the initial key and the target key. However, in these particular modulations, instead of using the chords on the scale degrees 2, 6, and 7 of the initial key as pivot chords, as shown in part 1, I'm going to use the 1 chord of the initial key as a common chord to make some of the modulations. The minor chord works well as a pivot chord since it moves readily to a dominant chord. The scheme looks something like this. To make the modulation stand out, we'll play a cadence in the initial key before modulating to the target key. Here are the 4 chords constituting the cadence in the first key. Here's the 1 chord of the initial key, which is also a common chord to the target key. This common chord will be either a 2, 4, or 6 chord in the target key. Notice that, in order to allow the ear to acclimatize to the sound of a tonic chord becoming a 2, 4, or 6 chord in the target key, we double its duration in the bar in which it falls. After playing the pivot chord, we play the dominant chord of the target key, and then confirm the new key with a cadence. Now let's look at the 5 modulations in more detail. First, let's take A minor going to C major. Let's hear an example. Here's the cadence confirming A minor. And here is where the A minor chord becomes a 6 chord in C major. All we need now is the dominant of C major, followed by a cadence to confirm the new key. Next, let's take A minor to G major. Let's listen to an example. First, the A minor is established with a cadence. Next, the A minor chord becomes a 2 chord in the key of G major. This is the common chord. And this is followed by the dominant of G major. And notice how the dominant chord is in first inversion. And it's usually in first inversion to create a smoother transition from the 2 chord to the 5 chord. And finally, we confirm the new key of G major with a cadence. The next modulation we're going to look at is of A minor going to E minor. And let's listen to an example. So first, the key of A minor is established with a cadence. And when we land on the A minor chord, this chord becomes a 4 chord in E minor, which is the common chord. And now we go to the dominant of E minor. And notice how the dominant chord is in third inversion, and this enables the bass note to remain stationary. So this creates a smooth transition from the 4 chord to the 5 chord. And we then change the inversion of the 5 chord becomes a first inversion, and then it resolves to the 1 of E minor, and we have the final cadence to E minor. The last two modulations rely on a different common chord from the tonic minor chord. Let's look first at the modulation of A minor to F major, and let's listen to it. So this modulation relies on the 4 chord of the initial key, A minor, becoming the 6th chord in the target key, F major. So we start off with a cadence in A minor, and when we get to the 1 chord in A minor, we then have another beat of the 1 chord in first inversion, which leads nicely and smoothly to the 4 chord in A minor. And the 4 chord is also the 6th chord in F major. So now we can go from the 6th chord in F major to the 5 chord in F major. And notice how the 5 chord is in first inversion, and this creates a nice smooth motion of the bass leading up to the 1 chord in F major. And then we conclude with the cadence in F major. Finally, we have the modulation of A minor to D minor. Let's listen. In this modulation, we use the 4 chord in A minor, which is the same as the 1 chord in D minor. So we start by establishing the key of A minor. When we get to the 1 of A minor, we can play the 1 again in first inversion, which leads nicely to the 4 of A minor, which is also the 1 of D minor. Now we can play the dominant of D minor in first inversion, and then back to the 1 of D minor, and we conclude the modulation with a cadence in D minor. So this concludes the explanations of how to modulate to closely related keys starting from any minor key.